Check the West Tech Podcast.
Welcome to the West Tech Podcast, powered by West Recruitment. My name's Dean Mumford, the Director at West Technology. We sit down with highly accomplished leaders in the Sydney technology industry as they share their journeys and opinions on the direction of our industry. We hope you enjoy this conversation. So today we sit down with Hani Arab, the CIO for construction business Seymour Whyte. Hani grew up in the rural part of Penrith, and after a brush with the law for being a budding graffiti artist, he locked in on his studies and pursued his career in the industry. He has now moved into the world of IT, which is a great story. We hope you enjoy this. Hani, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Dean.
Not a problem. So, mate, in your own words, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, I grew up at Western Sydney. It was rural. We had a little market garden. The daily chores was go to school, come home, help mum and dad in the farm. It's hard work. As a young kid, you don't want to be doing that sort of work. You want to get on your BMX bike. You want to get on your games. But part of that is, community of the family and discipline. And so sometimes you don't like something, but it's good for you, right? And so we grew up for many years that way. And, it came a point in time where I did get to high school and I did get in the wrong crowd and got into the wrong influences. And as a young person, you try to make friends and alliances. And sometimes you do things that you wouldn't ordinarily do, but you want to fit in and you want to be accepted. And so, found myself in the wrong place. And, it was a life moment to say, well, what do you want to do, son? My dad would say to me, do you want to keep going down this sort of road or you want to try and do something with yourself? And so my dad always gave me two options, was happy to support you in education and fund it and whatever you need. But if you're not going to do it and commit to it 100%, there's a job waiting for you right here on the farm.
Wow. So in terms of your schooling at the time, I probably take it you weren't overly academic?
No, not at all. Like I think, it's not like today where you've got so much channels of education, whether it's, ChatGPT to teach you something or YouTube, channels, those things weren't available. And so it was easier to get games and to have fun rather than, pick up a boring book and try to learn something. And so, you're right. It wasn't something that I picked up and was just never afforded that sort of focus and area to say, learning can be fun. It wasn't seen to be fun.
Were you a visual learner?
I was more leaning towards drawing and inquisitive. I'd be with one of these kids that would pull things apart, struggle to put it back together again. But definitely more on the creative side.
Great. And how did obviously you're at the juncture in the road, your dad's giving you the options of working in the farm, the hard labour, or getting education and a career. Tell us what your process was there and where you went.
So one of the things that made me say, well, it's actually worth learning and seeing what that's like and going through the pursuit of learning and trying to get a career and go to university, for example, was in year 10, the school gave us an option to go and do work experience. And my dad had some friends. One was an architect and one was an engineer. So the first one was an architect and I went and did a week with the architect. And for somebody who'd lived up on the land sort of thing, to go to sort of the city and see what architects do in front of, and AutoCAD was just coming out. They had this AutoCAD computer sitting in the corner that no one was using yet, right? The vendor had provided it. They were still using the drafting boards. And they said to me for the week, here's the manual, work out how to use it and show us what you learn. And so I spent the week with this computer learning AutoCAD, but also the lead architect, the principal architect would take me to meetings. And we would drive around in his Jaguar XJ something, and he had a phone. His thing was like timber with a phone, and I was just blown away. I go, man, what a lifestyle! I've just never seen. So back then, everyone had a tie and a shirt and whatever else.
So well before mobile phones.
Well before mobile phones, that was a common thing, right? And so this is what their lifestyle was: new tech, nice cars, latest gadgets. And I thought,
kid from Penrith would never have seen anything like this.
No, not at all. And so when I finished that week, he worked a lot with another engineering firm, and he said, look, would you like to do another week with an engineer? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And then I went with the engineer, and again, similar sort of thing, they're taking me to meetings. I was dropping off plans and all sketching by hand at the time. And he had a Porsche 911, and I'm going, wow. Like I just was going, this is better than the farm. Like I see what my dad does every day, and I'm thinking, I've got to do something. So that's really what convinced me that I at least got to give this a go and try to learn.
So where did you go from there?
So the first thing I did was I got given a maths tutor, a physics tutor, and just focus on particular subjects, topics. And so to demonstrate to myself that if I get good tuition and at my pace of learning and somebody who has one-on-one with me, that I can actually turn myself around. And that's what happened. I was able to learn algebra and then learn certain topics, trigonometry, and go through them and really excel. And every exam I get in the top 99 percentile, so like really top marks. And that was enough. And it was those analytical subjects that I had an affinity to, because there was always a binary answer. Like there was a fixed number. You either knew how to do it or you didn't know how to do it. And if you didn't know how to do it, you worked back and said, well, what was the process? And so I ended up doing physics, maths, chemistry, engineering, science, like all these analytical subjects where my strong point was.
So obviously there's already leanings there towards technology, sort of binary systems processes.
Exactly, yeah.
So you probably didn't realize it at the time. So you would have been studying to become, was it an architect or an engineer?
Okay, so I wanted to be an architect first. However, my rankings at the time got me into engineering first. And so I thought to myself, I'd do the first year, and I heard a lot of stories of people, you can do the first year, then you can transfer. But when I got to the end of the first year, like I didn't hate it. I thought it was good. I was enjoying it. I was doing well, and I just stuck with it.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. So then talk us through your first role. You finished your studies.
So part of the course that I was doing was called a sandwich course. It was quite innovative at the time. There was no other university having a thing called a sandwich course, where what they were trying to do is have students finish and be valuable to employers, not finish and then you're the guy who's making the coffee and doing the photocopying. So you would do a year of study, do a few subjects, and then you go for 6 months and work at a place. And you can choose optional to do 1 or 2 subjects in the evening. You didn't have to, but you could. And so my first job, and it took me a while to get my first job, and it was only ever a summer job, and it was the Blue Mountain City Council.
Right.
Working with their engineering function there. And I loved, again, it was a first job. They sent me out with work crews, council crews. We're laying culverts, we're fixing up driveways, we're, fixing up things around the rail line. Also,
you would have been in high vis and boots.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So how did you go from there? Obviously post studies. Where did you go to get your first real kick on?
Through my education, I probably had about 3 or 4 different work experiences by the time I got my degree at the end. So it took a while. I think it was about 7.5 years by the time I finished, or 8 years, but because I was doing work. So I ended up working with State Rail. So at Valley Heights, there was the district civil engineer who had a rail section between Penrith and Mount Victoria. So I did a year with State Rail and again, doing rail maintenance and then working on capital works as well. And then I worked over a summer break with the Sydney Water near Liverpool. And then I worked with, who else? Council, Rail, Water. And then I got a job with the Regatta Centre at Cook's Construction. They were doing the regatta had just finished, and they were doing these earthworks and overhaul removal so they can get aggregate out for ready mix and Pioneer and all those CSR.
Right.
And so as an engineer, I was looking at how do you optimize earthworks and use the right gear at the right, and how many to put in to a haul to optimize the production for the day.
They did the Olympic rowing there.
They did, exactly.
Yeah,
yes.
right. So that would be really interesting and practical. And so obviously it looks like you're well underway with your engineering career.
Absolutely. It was full-on engineering at the time, yeah.
And then, so where did computing come into this?
Okay, so then when I finished my university degree, everyone has to do this thesis, this major project. And the major project I chose was designing retaining walls with a computer system from first principles. And so that really sparked my interest about how you could build a tool to speed up the design of a retaining wall, which even from first principles is not very hard from a first principle design process, but putting it in the system, and so that a construction worker could punch in some values and get the lean, the height, and how much, all these details that then they would know and go and build the product. Sounds fairly simple now. You could do it with an Excel spreadsheet. However, building it with a user interface and showing the person the steps how to build it was what I built. But that gave me the bug to say I really liked it again. I created something. I was very proud of what I created. And so when I started working in engineering, it always had that sort of feeling of knowing more about IT. I understand how systems work. And so I kept doing some self-study. I got myself certified in, at the time, Cisco, Novell CNE certification, Microsoft certification. And these were because they were very practical certifications that I could learn something and apply. And so when I did that and I was at work still as an engineer, we had all computer systems that were all connected and we're delivering sort of major projects. I became known somebody who was quite good with technology, and then people would lean on me to help them. And the word gradually spread and allowed me to progressively transition to that role.
So technology was sort of starting to creep into what an industry that really hadn't had it before. And you're probably an early adopter in the sense of, okay, I want to harness this and get to use it to make my life easier or have a longevity in terms of your career. You mentioned the AutoCAD, the architects that no one went near. So you could start to see that there's a direction there where the world was headed.
When I was on site, one of my first projects where I was on, we would, like, the most used machine on site was the fax machine. Like, imagine we're doing RFIs, like requests for changes, or understanding from the designer's point of view, and people would mark up drawings, photocopy them, and then fax them to the engineers or architects or whoever to clarify certain things. That was commonly, we were just in the transition of that, and people would start getting email. And then people now were moving away, but they would still use both. There were still people that didn't want to go near the computers, and then there was email. But people could see that the email was so much faster. Like, you'd send it within seconds, you'd have it, and it's much more richer in information. So that was sort of the transition that I was going through, and really educating more senior managers about this type of technology.
So tell us about your first role as an IT manager.
The first, I'll give you one, I suppose, pivotal career moment for myself where on projects, as a young engineer, you are empowered, right? No one holds your hand. They want you, you've come out with a degree, you've got little experience, but you get it pretty quickly, and you work with supervisors or superintendents who are practitioners, and they really help educate and solidify your theory in practice. But you're ordering hundreds and thousands of dollars of materials, and it's got to be scheduled and on time. So you take a bit of a significant responsibility. So then I come into the IT world, and I'm managing half a dozen people, and we have certain goals on service quality, service delivery, and delivering of projects. And I remember at the time, similar to my mindset when I was an engineer, where I felt like I had to know everything and I had to be in control of everything and I had to drive everything. And I'm falling behind, I'm struggling, I'm putting pressure on myself. And I remember one manager came into me and sat me down, and I told him all the problems I was going with. And he just looked at me and said, "So it sounds like you need more people." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "So what's the problem? Like, you need more people, get the job done." And so that authority or that permission to go, I'm overworking this, I'm overthinking this thing as an engineer, how I would have done it, because just putting more resources is not sort of the first choice you would go to.
So it didn't even cross your mind at the time?
No, I didn't think that I had the authority to go and do that. And I was trying to deliver a good outcome, a cost-effective outcome, but at the same time, it wasn't going to happen. And so somebody from the outside, just to give me that permission to go, we trust you, you're a professional, use your sense of judgment and do what you need to get the outcome.
You're a smart guy. You're an engineer, right?
So go and do it. And so that was one moment where it really said, okay. And I just started making some calls, initially getting some contractors in to help me, people that I worked with in the past, and it just sort of helped build confidence and momentum and really focus on the outcome, the outcomes driven.
And at what point did you burn the bridge and go, okay, I'm an IT guy now, I'm no longer an engineer, or I'm an engineer that's now doing IT?
It took a lot longer. Like, I would say, even though the role was full IT, so when I went to, there was a project we did up north, Yalgoo and Chinja, it was a Pacific Highway. I went on to that job for Warragamba Dam. I was an engineer at Warragamba Dam, site engineer. I went to Warragamba Dam. They were going to put me on drainage partially and then say, look, we'll let you do some IT work because there's no one on site, it's remote, and we need somebody. So, yep, fair enough. That's what attracted me to go and move my family and go to that role. Then I get there, and within 2 or 3 months, the senior leadership realized, actually, this is a full-time gig. Like, we've got over 100 people here. There's surveyors and design engineers. They need to be supported. It's costing us if we don't have the right people here. And so it quickly became, within the first 3 or 4 months, it became a full-time role. So by the time I left that role, which was about 2.5, 3 years. I came back to Sydney, and my job was full-time IT. I was supporting multiple projects, civil and building in New South Wales. But I would say there's a subconscious feeling deep down that I still haven't earned myself to say I'm an IT person, even though I was, and I was doing it full time. But when you're working with other IT people who have come through software development or systems engineering, and they've come through that degree,
The more traditional
the
routes.
traditional routes, you just don't know. You might call it imposter syndrome, where you think, am I good enough for this role? Even though I continually studied, I continually learn, and I'm getting the job done. But I think it took many years after that to really see, actually, I've been doing this for a long time.
You're
and I can do
definitely
it.
not
Yeah,
out of your depth.
yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
I understand that. So you were with Abbey Group for a long time,
Yes.
which later became Lend-Lease.
Lend-Lease.
So you would have seen a lot of transition or change in the business in that time.
Huge amount of growth in the Abbey Group time. I think we would have had in the order of anywhere between 400 to 500 people working for the company, and by the time they acquired, it would have been over 3,000.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
so-
huge growth.
Yeah, huge growth.
And the last role that you did there, tell us about that.
So I was a group manager role. I was looking after everything except the ERP and the financial system. So I was looking after project delivery, meaning that when we ramp up a project or decommission a project, I was looking after the networks and became network/security, looking after service desk. And traditionally we had everything on premise, on site. So we had a 9-seat service desk with all the systems that you'd have in place, following an ITIL service management practice. What else do we have? We had some SharePoint skills, and change. We didn't really have a strong presence at then. We ran cabs and whatever, but the IT people ran it. And then I had a small team doing, I would say, major projects, really focused on projects, and they would get projects to lead and deliver.
All right. And in terms of yours, leadership style, how would you describe that? Like at the time, obviously you had people you were working with. Is it something that came naturally to you, or did you have to refine it?
Definitely, it's always evolving. I think when I first started, you learn, like I never went to some sort of management school and said, this is how you do management. I learned by observing and seeing people around me and how they operated. And there's been many key people that I would look at and go, I love the way that person ran that meeting, or I love the way that person communicated. And I would try to learn their approaches and certain techniques. In terms of a style, it was in the early days, it was more, sort of a manager, dictator-led type, do it this way, I'm the manager. Yeah, there was much more formality, because even in the engineering field, it felt that way as well. Historically, that was the common leadership style.
Do you think that's because it's binary, the work you're doing is either right or wrong, or it holds up or it doesn't, or...
Well, I just think that the industry itself has never really been very good at the soft skills. Like, I just don't think there may be certain exceptions to that rule, but commonly, I don't think we invested a lot in leadership styles or leadership training. And then when we did, I don't think we saw the value in it as much as technical training and just getting the job. It's a historically, when I'm going through construction, it's a male dominated, can be rough industry. People tell you as it is, and so it's, you can imagine then sort of servant leadership is not something that's going to essentially work in that field as much, and it wasn't present. I think over the years, leaving that industry, working in other industries, the facility management industry, for example, we're doing a lot of B2C, business to consumer type interactions, and it's all about the user experience and the customer experience. That has really evolved my leadership, and that is what's now cemented a new style of leadership in my team.
Did you look to anybody in particular? I know you said you pick and pulled your style, but was there any one person that you went, I want to model my leadership off how that person operates?
I can't say that I've picked somebody, just a sole person, and tried to be predominantly influenced by that style. I would say that I've had several strong personalities and people that I respect and look up to, and seen how they've operated over the years. Because I've worked, say, with Abbey Group for 15 years, I've been able to see people for that period and see how they've operated. It hasn't been just one interaction. So I've learned the way they operate and how they're respected and what outcomes they get. And so, I know when somebody's talking with authority and when somebody's having a bit of a joke and when somebody, those tones I can learn and see, and I can see how other people are receptive to that type of leadership. And so I think that's how it's evolved.
And have you had a mentor throughout your career?
I haven't had an official mentor. However, you build friendships, and friendships, you're able to share more personal things with somebody you can trust. And that essentially is a mentor. He's giving you feedback from an alternative perspective, probably much older, more experienced, wiser. However, it wasn't, this mentorship idea, again, in my world growing up, it wasn't a common thing that said, have you got a mentor?
It wasn't formal.
It wasn't,
It wasn't
formal.
as structured.
Yeah.
I think even like we say, a sounding board, someone you go to,
Yeah.
and they're happy to impart their knowledge or give guidance. And I think sometimes having someone that isn't close to you is even more valuable because
Yeah.
you get to, they've got the luxury of distance and
Yes.
space to go, well, on face value, this is how I'd navigate. And you might
Yes.
say, well, I didn't think this would work, but then obviously their perception is very different. So
Yeah, and I think I've definitely had those conversations both internally and externally. It just hasn't been under a formal banner of a mentee relationship.
And have you strategically managed your career to say, okay, I want to do this for 2 to 3 years. The next step is going to look like this, and this is how I'm going to get there. Have you mapped it out, or really been done it with purpose, or has it just been?
I'd love to say yes. I'd love to say yes, but no. I think, again, that lack of a formal mentor, somebody who's been there and done, like I think if you had somebody who was a generation ahead of you and they're giving you advice on how you can navigate your career, I think that would be hugely valuable. I didn't have that luxury or even had that visibility or foresight that would be something that is available and would be of value. I spoke with other colleagues, not in IT, but in other areas that we became friends, and we would discuss certain, aspirations and what we wanted to do. So I did have that sort of sounding board from that perspective. In my later years, yes, I have become more strategic and saying, well, what do I want to do? How do I invest in myself to try and get a certain outcome? And that outcome can change, but at least you've got this sort of North Star that you can go, well, this is roughly where I want to head. What do I need to get to those things? And I have mentored multiple people now over the years, and I can talk to them through my experiences. And I do tell them why I think it's good to have somebody to mentor you, somebody you can help strategically manage your career, whatever that looks like. And no two people have the same aspirations. Somebody may lean more on, say, family life or wanting to have some family goals, and that may disrupt their professional career, but that's okay. Okay, what does that look like? And how can your professional career still exist and accommodate your life when you're ready to benefit from a professional career? So there's multiple different discussions that I've had with people.
I think that's a COVID thing. Since COVID, everyone was working from home, and they're like, they've seen the family. I think suddenly they go, well, this is why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And then to go back into the office, it's almost like, look, I don't think I'm going to go do this 5-day, 60-hour week thing. I think I really just want to spend time. My kids are they're only little once.
Yes.
And I've even in recruitment, we've seen such a mind shift in terms of
Yes.
what people look for when they're changing jobs. It's gone from money, seniority to work-life balance, and a pay packet that's maybe not the top tier, but they're also going to have a life around it, or an environment that fosters family and balance. Because
Well, you say that, I've probably employed, just I'm thinking on the service, there's probably a dozen people in the last 3 years. And it is more common now where they will ask you, how many days in the office do you want me to be in? And I would say to them, look, well, this job, we want you to start full-time in the office because we want you to create a name for yourself. We want you to blend with the team, understand the culture, and then we can look at what a reduced roster in the office will be. But it's always difficult on a level 1 role because we're in the office. There's the hands-on stuff.
and there's too much learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it is hard. I think you obviously get more luxury with other roles, more specific specialty roles. You have that flexibility where you can do a lot of your work remotely, and that's fine. But there is a value of, especially in the level 1, level 2, bonding with a team, understanding the issues at hand, understanding how people are solving those problems, because generally it's multidimensional. It's not just one thing, and you need other experts involved.
Who's the best boss you've ever had?
Who's the best boss? Look, I've had a couple, and again, I go back to that whole not having one significant role model, but I think every manager that I've had, I can't say I've had a really bad manager. Like, I think every single one that I've had, I would say has been very good. I think in my early days, one of the very first ones I had, I remember, um, because as an engineer, you'd have to cost code certain materials to a particular area of work because they measure the productivity of a certain, the Gantt diagram is a work breakdown structure, and we measure how we're going. And I remember I was coding things of this invoice, and it would go to the project manager, the project director, and he would double check it. Anyway, this I can't remember. I'd only been there a couple of months, and he wrote a little post-it note, and he scribbled this thing on, and he said something like, and I think I still got the post-it note, but he said something like this is total rubbish, Hardy, and he signed it, and he said, and like coming from my manager, I'd been there a couple of months, and I was so offended by it. Like it was.
What was he meaning? What did he
Like,
mean?
Well, but I respected the fact that he just put it straight in my face, and it was so direct. And I went and spoke to him afterwards, and we went through it. The fact that I didn't give it enough attention, and I didn't try to understand what I was doing, and it was just sort of like a tick and flick, and say, well, I just put a code on there, and it wasn't the right code, and he pushed back on it, and this person was always very good at communicating, very good in meetings, and was very precise at getting an outcome. And I think that was one thing I really liked about that manager. And then I've had other managers who, what I've learned from them is the value of family. He was one of the guys that would always say, if you had something at home or something that was bugging you, he'd be the first one to say, drop the work, go do what you have to do. We'll get someone to sort it out. And I hadn't seen that level of awareness of the value of family until that manager.
I think the old school mentality is leave home at home, park it at the door. When you're at work, you've got to work.
Absolutely.
You need to be here. And I think it's just, you can't. Like if it's, your work's important, your family's important, it's very hard.
So, when I was saying to you that I haven't chosen one mentor to be sort of this sort of idol character that I could learn from. So there's this one manager that I highly respect, learned a lot from them, how they negotiate in meetings, how they think, how they speak, a lot of. But this same manager, once I went in there, and I can't remember what the issue was, but there were some issues, right? And I was talking about something, and I brought up this issue, and he straight away stopped me because he sensed that I was getting to a topic that was personal. And he stopped me and he said to me, honey, no, I think you're going to go into some sort of personal issues. This is nothing to do with work. Don't want to know about it.
Oh, wow.
And he stopped me like that. And I was like, okay. And so in a point where I was about to open up about something, he told me to stop. I don't want to know about it.
Oh,
and that was
shut that down for life.
Shut down.
Yeah.
But then again, in many other aspects, very good. So this is why I think it's very hard to discount somebody to say, well, just because of that one event, he's no longer of any value to me. No, but he wasn't. For many years later, I could always converse with him. He'd always give me significant value, and very experienced negotiator, very experienced just thinker. When I see him operate and negotiate just logically, I learned a lot from him.
I think he just had a definitive boundary in terms of personal life and professional life, and he didn't want to cross them. He didn't want to blur that. So,
and again, you got to look at his history. How did he get to where he got to, and what were the experiences that influenced his behavior?
Well, that's driven him to form his style, and that's his mantra.
Exactly.
So what was your hardest decision you've ever had to make as a leader?
Well, there's probably several ones over the years. Like I remember the first time I had to get rid of somebody who I was very patient with, and I and I learned this from other managers, right? They would say to me, better the devil you know than the one you don't. Like, don't think by getting rid of somebody, you've just fixed the problem. You actually haven't tried to solve the problem. You just got rid of the problem. You've avoided the problem. And so I've taken that from the early days and go, well, when I have somebody that I'm challenged with in terms of not getting the right sort of performance or the right sort of outcome, not giving up on them and saying that, try to help them, educate them. What are the issues? And I remember this person wasn't reporting to me, he was reporting to somebody else, but they would come to me and talk to me about this person, and I'd give them the same advice. No. If it's not working out, you need to look within. Like, don't look at and just something to blame. What aren't you communicating? How are you managing this person to get the outcome? And so it went on for almost 9 months, and they were still not getting the outcome. Then I had other people talk to me about it, and I said, you know what? There's more to this. And so I remember speaking to the person one-on-one as well. And what I learned at the end of the day, this person was a single child. He'd just been sheltered for so long, and he just had a lot of life learning to still learn before he got into the professional workplace. And so I was very clear and honest with this person and say, look, I've tried to get you the the comments that I've been hearing, trying to protect you and get you to a point where to say you can make it. But what I've realized is it's actually it's not their fault and it's not your fault, but there's some life learning you need to learn here. And I think the best thing for you is to try something else before you try to get into IT. So I think that was one specific incident that was challenging. It was the first time that I've sort of done it. There's been other challenges where I've invested in a particular strategy and invested in money and ideas and influenced other people to support the idea, and then get 9 months into it and find out, shit, this is the wrong tool. It was the wrong technology. It's the wrong, in principle it sounded good, but in reality the technology was not mature enough there. And having to go back to my boss and say, look, this is where we're at. This is where we are. I know you supported me on this. I know this is what I said in the business case. I know however, I'm really concerned that I think this is not going to work. I know we'd already spent over $150,000 on technology and all sorts of things. So it wasn't a cheap exercise, plus the people cost. But to my surprise, my manager at the time was very supportive, and she was the founder and owner as well. And I think just recognized the courage it took to go back and put that forward. And then she supported me wholeheartedly and said, look, it's sunk cost now. Like, there's no point throwing more money into it. If you're telling me it's the wrong decision, what is the right decision? Come back to me with what is the right decision. And so that was another, again, it wasn't as bad as I thought. And everything after that was much better, right? Actually, it was a good decision. But you build up these things, all these fears in your own mind thinking, oh my God, what does this mean?
We hope you're enjoying this episode of the West Tech Podcast. To stay updated with our latest episodes, please click, follow, and subscribe to help us grow our community. Oh, rightly so. Telling someone they've spent $150,000 on something that's not going to work.
Yeah.
The anxiety you would
I've
have had.
advocated for it.
Yeah, and you were the one promoting it. I think 95% of people, I think maybe more, would have just written it out and said, oh, well, we gave it our best. And But, you called it when you saw it. I thought that there'd probably be a level of respect on the back end of that.
And I think there was. And as I said to you, it turned out to be a lot better than I made it in my own mind.
And when you go to hire people for your team, what do you look for?
I think the biggest thing you're trying to find is somebody's true motivations, their passions. I think technically, when I get CVs, sometimes it's hard to tell them apart. Like there's certain trodden pathways that people follow. And I go, okay, whether they've done a degree or whether they've gone a Cert 4, whatever the diploma, they've got some fundamental training. But then you can interview 3 or 4 people and they're very different. And so I try to look at, what are their hobbies? What are their interests? What got them to do IT in the first place? And really what do they aspire to? Where do they want to go? Generally speaking, if they've got some aspirations in the field, then I know they've got a bit of a journey they want to follow. If they haven't really got much of a foresight in the journey, or there's something that's actually outside IT, then I go to myself, okay, well, is this just a filler at the moment? Like, are they really in it? Because we invest a lot of time and effort to train people. And ideally, we want to get at least 2 to 3, 4 years out of somebody before they feel like, okay, they've outgrown our organization. They may want to look for something else, whether it's a new industry or new tech stack or whatever that looks like. But I think the biggest thing, number one, is passion and motivation. And then number 2, what's their aspirations? Where do they want to go? And how do we fit in the puzzle of that aspiration? Because I think then I can join the pieces. Okay, I know exactly why he's here. I know where it's going to get him. Yep, this person is. I'm not fearful of somebody who wants to come and leave us in 3 years' time. That's fine. I think that's part of that balance between having someone who's energetic, who's committed, wants to learn, and wants to get an outcome.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you have that mindset around there, because a lot of people think 3 years is not long. Average tenure, will tell a different story though. There is a disconnect. So
it's funny. One of my first CIO roles that I got against this founder owner I was telling you about was phenomenal in terms of leadership. And I remember I'd only been there, I don't know, maybe 6 months, and we were doing monthly one-on-ones. And I think within the first 6 months, I think she said to me, she goes, like, she brought it up. She goes, okay, so what's next for you after here? And I thought, like, I was shocked. I'm going, are you getting rid of it? Like, in my mind, I'm processing, I'm going, what's happened why are you telling me where am I going? I've only even been here 6
There was
months.
alarm bells.
Yeah, I was just like, again, overworking it. But it was a genuine thing. It was a genuine question to ask, what do you aspire to? Where do you want to go? Like, because once I know where you want to go and when you're ready to get there, we can talk about a plan to, replace your role and what that look like, and you be part of that process. Just thinking more strategically and long term, say, I'm not afraid to talk about at some point you may want to move on. What does that look like? When is it the right time? Let's discuss it, and let's make sure we get a good transition between, someone taking over. So that's how the discussion went.
That's a very progressive way of leading, isn't it?
Yeah,
To have that, to be prepared to say, well, no, we need you to go because we're not big enough to keep you, and we realise that early. So that would have been very interesting. At the time, probably very confronting and different.
It's just getting, because from the industry I came from, it wasn't something that was like that was discussed. So I think it shows the level of maturity, it shows the level of trust, and opens, and that vulnerability that it opens up between two people, right? Because you're having these hard discussions, well, not even hard discussions, they're just potentially sensitive discussions. But when you can be honest and open and know where everyone stands, I think very powerful.
Absolutely. And you're a lifelong learner, I'd say now. You're obviously naturally curious. What emphasis do you place on qualifications in people that, might want to join your team?
Look, I think qualification shows a level of commitment. It's not for everyone, so I don't necessarily hold it as the high watermark for every achievement. However, I don't discount it either. Like, I think if somebody's gone to the effort and done a master's or done a PhD or done whatever, I know the value of that training. I know what's put in from a financial commitment, a time commitment, a family burden, everything else that goes with it. So somebody's got to do it for a reason. And I think it's, again, if it links back to their motivations and what they're trying to achieve, I think it's of huge value. I think also people need to understand how they learn and what's just going to make them more valuable to any business or to themselves. And so everyone learns differently, and I use a form of mixed sort of channels, whether it's short little training clips, whether it's just devoting some time to be inquisitive and sit, with ChatGPT and ask it, what does this mean? What is this? And go through the topic and spend an hour diving into thoughts about certain concepts and go, okay, I've really had to think about a certain thing I knew nothing about.
Well, it's funny you mentioned sort of ChatGPT and AI. Where do you think that's going to finish in terms of being fully utilised in a corporate like where you're working at the moment, in the business landscape?
That is a absolutely impossible question to answer. However, I can give you some indicators. I mean, we know it's going to change at pace, and we've seen it even in the last 2 to 3 years. Like, I remember when it first started, you couldn't link to your own corporate databases. Now it's so easy to link it in and get context-aware LLMs providing responses. Now you can create your own agents, which was not impossible, but you had to be very technical to try and make things work. Now it's out-of-box almost capability, and it just keeps getting quicker and faster and better. And now multimodal, where you can get audio, media, and text all in one go. It's going to continue to escalate, and we're looking at how we can adopt the AI primitive technologies and solve industry challenges. This is construction specific narrow use cases that weren't thought by the commodity providers. So large language models, we use it from a commodity perspective. Our goal currently in the business is to drive, whether it's Copilot adoption, so everyone just uses it every day and getting value from it every day where it makes sense. But just keeping as part of the training to remind people, this is your content, your name is on the output. So you can't trust this thing blindly. You have to have some appreciation of how it works. And the only way you're going to do that is by using it. And so where it's going to end up, who knows? I mean, I just think it's going to get quicker, more capable, faster, better. I think one of the biggest challenges is the consumption or the absorption of power and water that it uses at the moment, that people are, I saw an article this week, I think, about how Microsoft took away some of the AI Claude use because of the cost of it, and they'd rather get humans to do it because it's cheaper. And so, everyone's going to be trying to drive the cost of the performance so people can still use it.
Even the data centers in Western Sydney that's popping up, they're huge, and it's all changing. In terms of the role of a CIO, what do you think the biggest challenges are facing CIOs at the moment?
It is multidimensional, but the first one is that this pace of technology. So you talk about AI. I mean, I'm happy to say that we're not experts in everything and we're continually trying to learn. I think what we can offer is we've seen a lot of technology and we've seen a lot of technology go in, not work very well, and just the process of adoption of technology and what needs to happen from a business process and an adoption perspective and a change management perspective. I think that requires that the human element, the empathetic, emotional intelligence element, and I think that's where senior executive technology leaders can offer an organization, understanding the business model, understanding the risks around that business model, what level of risk appetite the business has, and then looking at, okay, what's their strategy, developing a strategy and helping execute that strategy when you're trying to manage people, process, and technology through that delivery.
I mean, obviously it's a balancing act, isn't it? And some people are able to do it really well, but it depends, I guess, on what the organisation's trying to achieve as well.
And most organizations always have people involved and people with relationships and people with influence, and how you manage that dynamic is really important and not easy. And so the technology element is one part, one dimension, and even any technology that you adopt that's mature and somewhat simple to implement, and I would say most complex, large technology stacks aren't. There's still that people, process, and relationship and managing that. We recently went through an ERP implementation, and it's significant. You know, from a transformation, from a disruption perspective, changing business processes, and it's, you know, they say ERPs almost are the lifeblood of an organization, and so you're just changing that entire system. So you imagine trying to get that adopted and embedded. You're always campaigning, advocating, influencing, encouraging, and telling people, look, it's bad on day one, but it just gets better every day, and selling that vision of what we aspire to and why we need it and what it's going to do for the business in its next growth phase.
What do you think a technology function is going to look like in the next sort of 3 to 5 years?
I haven't really given that much thought, but I would say, you know, we're looking at sort of more automation through whether it's AI bots or agents, or using natural language to communicate and get the fundamentals of support. So when you look at support, if you've got good documentation and good data governance in terms of sorting about sensitivity around data and classification, you'd imagine that you're building your own large language model in terms of the content, and then you can have a conversation with it to try and find information quickly. Like I look at the moment, we have this information management system, which is hundreds and hundreds of documents, hundreds and hundreds of forms. And so a new person coming into a business and trying to find information through a traditional search can be quite challenging. But imagine if you can amplify that or empower it through a chatbot of such, where you're interrogating the knowledge center through an LLM and you're getting, you know, response specific, and you're having a conversation with it. I think that these are the sort of things, imagine amplifying those sort of processes, whether it's support, whether it's document retrieval, information retrieval, whether it's creating more information from your business context. I think that speed is something that is going to accelerate. And then it's about quality and governance and making sure you are getting good quality content that doesn't need a lot of rework, and you're not creating more risk from the business side.
Do you think that'll involve larger teams or smaller, more streamlined teams?
Look, you would have to think it's smaller teams. You would have to think. I mean, there may be functions within a business we may need a reorganization because they're doing more technical for the build. But I think traditionally, overall, if you were to put technology as one big function, I would say you'd be aiming to reduce it, definitely not increase it. It wouldn't make sense to me for all that investment, all that smarts that we hear about. That's something you need more people to run it.
Like more legwork, manual work. You were mentioning the CIO 50. You want to tell us about that accolade?
Yeah, the CIO 50 was when I was working in the facilities management industry, and we built a range of safety tools. So essentially, we had three technologies that we were able to engineer together using a white label tool as well, where we had 1,000+ workers, lone workers, working alone, servicing retail post office centers, and we needed to ensure their safety. And so we were using technology off a mobile device that they would have on their hip, and it would measure their movements, and we would ensure that they were always moving from a safety perspective. And then when they would enter the site, they would acknowledge that they are entering the site, and when they would leave, they would click a button that said that they left. And so it was a way to track 1,000+ workers across Australia going by themselves and servicing these premises to make sure that they were safe. And we had business rules, and we had an offshore service center that would call them if somebody didn't respond. They could have GPS coordinates. They could see where they were. They would escalate to the local contact. So we had all these business process mapped out to ensure the safety of workers, that they would. So if somebody didn't show up on site, they would make a call. Why didn't you show up? And what was happening? And so we could then inform the manager that before they started their shift, this is what's happened. This wasn't cleaned because someone was sick or someone couldn't get there. And so being that proactive approach. But the solution essentially created 3 technologies, put it together, serviced it for 1,000 workers, and they were providing a lone worker safety type environment for the workers.
That would have revolutionised that business.
Well, it was a contractual requirement, but the way we approached it and the way we did it was using commodity technology. And there was only one tool that we used, which is the white label tool, which stitched it all together for us. And we built the business rules in one technology, and then the other technology was all the push and pull for the device to talk to the device. And they use it very similar, that same sort of white label technology. They use it in the mines, and they can work on sat phones and all sorts of things. So I think it was a very cost-effective but reliable solution is the way we built it, and I think that was why it was so noticed.
It's an impressive accolade, though.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, in a very, very competitive field. Now, onto yourself. If you were starting your career in IT today, how would you approach it?
Well, it depends what you want to, again, having that vision of where you want to end up. Like if you want to end up as, for example, if your aspiration is a CTO, it can be very different from a CIO. It can be very different from a CISO, for example.
Okay, sorry, just on that, what are the, if you had to describe the differences between a CTO and a CIO, how would you sort of decipher the two?
My interpretation, the CTO is somebody who's building and owning a particular software development stack, who's creating a product. That product can be commercial as a revenue generator, or it could be internally for a business, but he's creating a software engineered product. The CTO is really engrossed in making sure he's creating the efficiency and the factory to produce code, test code, push it to production, and iterate that process. And how do you optimize the dev teams from a DevOps type approach? That's the CTO. The CIO is a more traditional, more long-standing label, which owned the technology function in business. And that's why you'll see traditionally some CIOs were reporting to the CFO because they were managing the mainframes for the finance system. And the reason why technology was brought into the business was the finance system. And that's where the history came from. But then where traditional CIOs now that are seen more as a partner or someone who can help transform the business and keep it relevant, that sometimes you'll see the CIO come out of the under the CFO to the CEO because he wants direct interaction and more selling their vision about how they can see the opportunity to change the revenue model for the business or the whole operating model. And then obviously the CISO owns the security. Security is growing as a concern. And so it's become more in its own right, a big function that even is reporting to the boards and looking at what their risk profile looks like. And so there are some now where you'll see they'll even split the CISO away from the CIO and make him at the same level reporting to the board because they're a strong target. Like a lot of the financial institutions, a lot of the highly regulated industries will do that.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously it's critical, business critical, the security. And I think that space has evolved as well.
Absolutely.
So what would you change if you were to start out again today? Would there be more strategy around how you'd manage your career or?
I think that's one thing, definitely. I mean, I don't like to carry regrets. I think there's no point, but I think you're right. If I had to change one thing, it would have been nice early on to go, don't leave your career to haphazardness. Yes, you don't control everything. There was one, I told you I learned little snippets from people. One manager once said to me, "Hun, if you're not designing your career, someone else is."
Right, okay.
So if you're not designing it, if you're not deciding what you want to do, what you aspire to, what course you want to do to get you to the next thing, what next course, what next position you want to apply for, someone else is doing it for you in the business, right? They may decide they don't want you to move anywhere. They want you to sit right here, and they're happy for you to sit right here, and they've designed it for you. Or if you've got a different opinion and you have a different desire, put that into action. Yeah.
You definitely, I mean, as a recruiter with my recruitment hat on, you need to drive your own career. If you're ambitious, then you need to make it happen. Sitting and doing a good job and hoping you get noticed isn't probably the right way to go about it. Like, you might get recognised and you might move up to a point, but I think you really do need to drive, okay, where do I want to go? What doors do I want to open, and how am I going to do that? So I think that's definitely something to be mindful of as you're coming up.
I think also to add to that, when I look at some of my colleagues growing up and seeing, their progression, and I saw one particular progress at a much faster rate than I did at the time, and I look at their career, like I stayed, say, 14 years with one company. This person would have had probably 4 or 5 different companies they worked for, on average 3 to 4 years maybe on each, or lesser some. And I saw that was a much advantageous, again, and I can only say that from the outside in, like looking and going, it looked like to me that was more advantageous than sticking around with one company. And even though I had different roles and different opportunities and it was a great place to be, you've got to get out of your comfort zone. If you have an aspiration somewhere, you've got to take that risk and know that it may not pay off, but so be it, and try the next thing. But that's where the opportunities lie, I think, is to do that. I think especially in technology, like I don't think it benefits you sitting with one organization for 7 years, specifically if you have some aspirations to get
No, I think you're right. I think there is a saying, though, that you need to go out to go up, because you're only limited by what opportunities open up in your business at that time.
Yeah.
And yeah, you definitely see people getting different industry experiences, and they're well-rounded by moving.
Yes.
That said, if you move every 12 months, you're probably not taking full advantage of that anyway, because you really only take that long to learn.
No, that's right. I mean, unless you're a consultant or you're a contractor and you're doing 12-month stints, different. That's different. But yeah,
that's outcome driven. That's
Yeah.
very, very project related. So, do you think personal branding for a career in technology is important?
my observation is, yes, I haven't seen, again, in the construction industry, I haven't seen the same level of focus of personal brands being developed or evolved or focused on. However, again, my experience outside the construction industry, I have seen it more prevailing, and I have seen it specifically in the technology space. I've seen leaders who are probably a generation above me that I looked up to, and I saw them become more evolved or more involved in social media and in professional networks, whether it's face-to-face in community events or online, that that they were doing that whilst even these platforms were evolving. And I saw that and observed that. And so I have myself personally become more involved, and I think there's value. And I think it's about having a voice in the community that you participate in, and having certain opinions and being involved in that community. And I think it helps evolve your own thinking, and it helps people challenge your own thinking. And so I think that is a way to contribute to technology, cyber, and so on.
Is there one personal attribute or a character trait that you could sort of pinpoint and say, well, this helped me be successful in my career?
I think just my natural attributes is one of calmness. I think, generally speaking, very younger days, probably not the same, but I was never a irrational or agitated person, I suppose, in making quick decisions and so on. So I think that level of calmness predominantly prevails, and I think that even at the most difficult times, I can go back and then come back and remain calm. I think I've gone through one cyber incident that was catastrophic in my career, and life-altering moment in terms of being responsible for an organization and being hit with a critical cyber attack, not sleeping for a couple of days, trying to get through this thing. I go back to that whole, I think it helped me mature more so, and just, again, remain calm and know that you can only control what you can control, and that's your responsibility, is to control the bits that you can control.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, the best advice that I've ever received. These are very, well, look, the one I mentioned earlier about taking ownership, and not waiting for permission when you're in a role. Like if you've got someone out there and the job you're doing and it might be getting difficult or whatever, don't always ask permission to do something that's part of your job to get the outcome. I think no one's going to get upset if you do something to achieve the outcome that you were put there to achieve.
Like show
You
initiative,
show
get
initiative.
it done,
Yeah, and just,
put your name on it.
Yeah.
Great. If you could have dinner with anyone, alive or dead, who would it be and why?
Wow, another one. I suppose in my lifetime, and one that's probably had some level of influence, would probably be Muhammad Ali. I think when I watch a lot of the videos and when you see him fight and whatever else, it wasn't just about how good he was as a fighter, just as a heavyweight, seeing how superior in his prime that he was against many of the fighters. But for somebody, we talked about education, right? He's not formally educated, but God gifted with wit and intelligence. And, you saw that through his poems. You saw that through his stance for going to Vietnam and what he believed in, and that conviction for his belief against all the prevailing thought at the time.
He was unpopular.
Exactly right. And
Yeah.
to come back, I think that's real courage.
I think it's integrity as well, but he was someone that just didn't fit the mold of a heavyweight boxer.
That's right. But
He was deep. And I think, it is easy to assume that academia is intelligence, but they're very different. Some of the smartest people have never set foot inside of a
that's right.
university.
He had street smart, right?
Absolutely.
And he would do these tours at universities giving talks, like, is this like somebody who's hasn't got a degree, but he's educating students, and through his thoughts and logic and the way he puts ideas together.
But how articulate he was as well. And also, I think, yes, he was remembered as a great, but also I think he was very entertaining. And I think because he was verbose and he was out there and he's a huge personality and people were just curious about this guy, like he was an oddity, that I think that, that sort of cemented him as a legend.
Absolutely. I think he did so many firsts. I mean, you say he was almost the first entertainer in the boxing world, right? Like no one, he knew the game to entertain, and that's street smarts, right?
He knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he leaves a huge legacy. So no, a huge boxing fan. Last question. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
What advice would I give my 20-year self? I would say don't get distracted with the life's distractions. I think focus on the core things that matter in life, and I think remember that work is a means to live, not the other way around.
Okay, so you think maybe hindsight, you were all invested in your work, and maybe you would say, oh, you could still get there. You don't need to.
Yeah, it needs to be that balance, right? I think it needs to be that balance. I suppose I wasn't conscious, being in the. I told you I never really planned the career. It was just doing, and I think there's something to be said about being aware and sitting back and do some of that planning and go, well, what am I going to put into this? Like any other investment, you say, well, what time and effort am I going to put in? What do I hope to get out of it? And just being a bit more purposeful rather than on this Autobot mode and just going with the flow. I think that will be.
It's hard because I think you are at the point, especially at the generation, is you do need to work hard to establish yourself, and you do need to get ahead and set yourself up in life. And I think, as a 20-year-old, that's all you really know is just like, you're not there, you've got to work towards it.
And look, in some degrees, for me, it was easier because there wasn't as many options as what's described today. Like you hear today on the social media and people portray this lifestyle that's almost unreal for the young generation, and they promote this, you got to be an entrepreneur. And, I've done 3 companies or 4 companies and all this. And I look at it and I just think, oh God, I dismiss it, right? But I never had that sort of level of noise in front of me to distract me even further. But these younger generations, they have it harder in a way to say, well, how do they decipher and denoise all that clutter and go, well, what's real and what's not? And, what's the path I should follow?
And also too, I think it impacts mental health because you talk about complication. I mean, you're walking around with a computer attached to your face all day.
Yeah, that's right. That's something we didn't have either.
No, I think I'm thankful for it now. At the time, you think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But you can see it does, but you talk about a distraction.
So you got to learn that discipline, how you can manage it, right? Give and it's a challenge, but it's these young people have to develop that discipline to say, when will I interact with these devices?
Hani, it's been a great chat to sit down with you today, and I thank you for joining us on the West Tech podcast. and I wish you all the best in your career.
Thank you very much. You definitely threw some doozies at me. Made me think, but I'll be thinking about them all the way home. Thank you,
very
Dean.
good. Thank you very much. All right.
All right.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the West Tech Podcast. Please don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more from IT leaders who are driving our industry. For more details of West Technology and how we can help you with your own career or to solve hiring issues for your IT team, visit us at westrecruitment.com.au.